Hi, Silver Running Cloud here. Silver Rain Running Cloud here. As usual, I don't like the lighting here, uh, and the room is quite a mess because I'm packing up to move again. Um, for those of you that don't know me, let me share my story with you. Um, I I've been a victim of the European desire to acquire my inheritance since I was born. One time I was listening to Elon Musk talking, and he was saying that there's a population crisis and that everybody who's going to be alive in the next 10 years from that day was already born. And I had never thought of myself that way before. Now, when you're trying to figure out your life and what's happening in your life, you don't have all the answers. While you're living through the events, you're trying to figure it out just like everybody else is. But once you figure out what's happening uh, to your life, things are very different. Well, my family owned tobacco land in North Carolina way back in the way back. And that was taken from us through miscegenation and laws against the indigenous peoples. The story of slavery is largely a myth. Slavery was a legislative act wrapped around the landowners of America, the indigenous people. Dane Calloway has found so much proof of this fact that I know from my family oral history and from common sense. We used to own the land, and we used to farm the land, and we used to make our living on the land. And then the Europeans came and decided that they would take the land, that the land would belong to them, that they would become the ones to develop all the land. So one of the ways that they were able to identify where the landowners were and exactly how much property we had was by doing the census. Okay? The census recorded race, addresses, who's in your family. The census did a very good job of identifying the enemy, is how I'm going to put it, of identifying who was going to be robbed. So my family comes up in the census, and I find out that Martin Edwards lives next door to Mary Deck, and Mary Deck is my great grandmother, and Martin Edwards is my great grandfather. At the same point in history, on both sides of my family, maternal and paternal, Europeans entered in through marriage and were able to assume control of the land and drive the mixed breed, the biracial kids off with cruelty and disowning. Now, if we were to really look at reparations as something designed to be fair, we would probably go back through and reclaim the land that the Europeans got through intermarriage. Okay, because they didn't come in saying, oh, we're going to beat you up and take your land. They come in with, we love you, we like you, we want to be close to you. Oops, this wasn't part of our plan. We gave you the okie doke. So a lot of people who think that they descended from slavery didn't. There's another historian with a very unusual name on YouTube that has also does a lot. He's living in Costa Rica. He also does a lot of history, of proving history through a lot of old European texts. A lot of old European texts before they advanced the narrative have the truth in it. Even Columbus knew that the copper-colored people of America, they were copper-colored. This is copper. You see? Copper is brown. Copper's browner than I am. Copper, copper's a brown thing. And that was the color of the people. Um, the thing is the Europeans have done the very same technique of dispossessing the owners of the land everywhere they've gone, everywhere they've gone. Now, if this was back in history, that would be one thing, but this is what's happening to me. Genocide over multiple generations means that when you are born, someone keeps track of you. Okay? Now, the Moore Law Group is keeping track of me. They are behind me losing a home in Phoenix, and they are behind a fraud on my Bank of America bank account. When I looked into how I got evicted, it was not a legal process. They did not afford me a legal process. They did not afford me a legal process when the Arizona State Troopers kidnapped me and tortured me. They did not afford me a legal process when the Memorial City Police in Houston threw me to the ground for no reason and created a huge event. My rights have been violated so many times without me having any access to a court or any kind of justice. And in the public discourse, Europeans completely ignore. They completely ignore my story. And my story, in so many ways, is absolutely outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. If you had thought that this was a communist country, the worst communist country that you know, where people's property was being taken and they were being imprisoned and they were being tortured and they were being silenced on the public floor, and the whole world was kept moving around them. That's what is happening in America now. And people won't hear me. People won't hear me. People won't help me. You know, I got burned. This was a chemical burn that I got in the FEMA concentration camp under Sergeant Donna Joubert. Those soldiers stole so much of my property that it's not even funny, and it still hurts. Man, I've been a victim. I really have. I really have. But uncovering the Moore Law Group behind so much of my persecution is more than surprising. As I told you, someone opened up a bank account in my name in 2006, but it did not appear on any of the bank records that I got until I got a printout of my Visa card history from the bank in California. They gave me hard copies that are missing now. I can't find the hard copies. And that wouldn't be the first time that someone's come into my environment and stolen documents from me. Somebody stole my trust fund, and all the bank accounts that my mother had. Somebody came into my house and stole that. And I've lived different places. So I'm stalked and I'm tracked and I'm targeted because I'm an heir. My mother acquired properties in Kentucky, Michigan, Illinois, Florida, and I believe St. Kitts in the Caribbean, but I'm not sure. My mother had so much property, and I own 1/4 of it, except my brother Andre Martin Petty, formerly an elected Illinois state representative, stole all of it. I contacted every politician in Illinois Senate. I sent them emails. I tagged them in social media. I was even able to hire a lawyer for about a minute until he realized that there was no way that he could fight City Hall, right? He couldn't fight the politicians, but you could have knocked me over with a spoon. You could have knocked me over with a spoon, okay? Because I thought my rights were protected. I thought that when my mother, a lawyer and a circuit court judge, created a trust, that it was inviolable, inviolable. Okay? I didn't think that criminals could steal your trust. I didn't know. I even called her judge friends and her lawyer friends, and they were like, oh, well, There's nothing we can do. Nobody did anything. Okay. So then I end up, you know, in San Diego, where a European hits me in the head and gives me a concussion because he wants me to move out of the senior housing development where I used to walk to the beach every day, 2.5 miles there, 2.5 miles back. And he said, when I moved in, he said, well, at least you're not a big black man, but you'll be out of here in 2 years anyway. They all are. I don't even want to go through the things that Roger put me through. But the police backed him. The San Diego police backed him, not me. So then I moved to Phoenix, and I'm being actually gang stalked by the Europeans in the community, Europeans who didn't look like they could afford to live in the luxury apartments. They looked skeevy. So I started to think, I think they get their rent subsidized in exchange for torturing real Americans and making sure that I had no place to live, because there weren't many places to rent there in Phoenix. When I moved to Phoenix, my credit rating was over 700. It was a 740. It dropped by over 100 points in no time whatsoever. Over 100 points in no time whatsoever. And while I was there, I would try to start a small business, and GoDaddy robbed me on the regular. GoDaddy. I set up websites with them, and they took over control of the websites and collected the advertising revenue by putting interfaces between me and my product. They stole my concept, my design, cloned my site, and I paid. I had to pay for it. And then there was Chandler Bolt and his publish your own book coaching business. And I find out that he wants everything stored on Google, which would be like, you may as well just tell people to come and take it for free. And Chandler Bolt locks me into a contract and changes the terms and conditions and sends the fake terms and conditions to my bank, and my bank supports them. Bank of America supports them. And I've got ACH withdrawals coming out of my bank account after my rent has gone through the roof. And then Cox Business, I got an account with them, and they wouldn't give me the password to my router. When I called their customer service, they didn't even know what password to the router meant. They didn't even understand what I was asking them for. But without a password to your router, anybody can intercept your traffic. Okay? But they wouldn't let me out of the contract, right? They wouldn't let me out of the contract. They kept taking $250 a month, although I wasn't getting any benefit from it. So I've seen so many systems that were supposed to be designed to help me turn against me and sabotage me. And I've seen this again and again and again. Now, at La Serena de Toscana in Phoenix, the Moore Law Group was the lawyer for the place, okay? And I was having big, serious problems with my residency there because they were not going to renew my lease because I called the police too much, okay? They failed to protect me while I'm renting there. And then they say, well, you called the police too much, so we're not going to rent to you again, okay? So I found myself in a situation where I could not find another apartment. I couldn't find another apartment. And my credit rating had dipped. And COVID came and disrupted everything. So they ended up suing me, but they didn't give me notice. And I know from my legal training, from Sheldon L. Epstein, and from my mother, that you can't sue anybody without giving them notice. They have to get notice. I did not get notice. And the Moore Law Group was behind it. The same people I tried to talk to say, you're violating my rights by not renting to me because I called the police to protect me when you wouldn't. Let's talk about this. And then I found out that the lawyer, Scott, didn't even show up at the office. And they even didn't answer the phone when I called because they knew that they were doing things illegally. But they also knew that the government and the courts were going to protect them. A Bank of America manager got a personal grudge against me, but also knew I was on the list. And he decided to sue me at the Dreamy Draw Justice Court for a bill I was already paying. I was already paying that bill in a credit fix organization that will summarize all your bills and pay them because the rent had just gone up too high. And the car note, I had to keep selling my car. The last one, the Honda Accord, the Honda Civic Hybrid, actually gave me breast cancer. Within 6 months of driving that car, I had breast cancer. And the mechanics didn't want to touch that car because they said that's an atomic engine in that car. We have to let it cool off before we even try to fix your broken air conditioner. So I had to get out of that car. So Honda keeps tricking me into wraparound loans by selling me Lemons, the Cross Tour, a car that gets 7 miles per gallon. I got 7 miles per gallon with the Cross Tour. That's a lemon, right? But it doesn't take long for you to find out that none of the laws are working for people like me, people that they want to rob and dispossess. Because I should have had my inheritance. And if I'd had my inheritance, I wouldn't have been victimized like that because I would have been able to buy a law firm and hire the lawyers myself and have the law firm as my business, right? And I could have had all of my lawyers not in the bar, except for one that goes into the court, so that all the legal research would be on common law and not maritime law. It would be on law that actually works for human beings, not the law that justifies the European theft and control of all the assets and the people and the heirs of America. So the attack on the real heirs of America is an excellent war strategy. If you don't have enough landed immigrants at the time to actually take over, you want to take over gradually, right? You can't, if you don't have enough fighters and killers and thieves to actually fulfill a manifest destiny and steal everything in a country, then you want it to unwind slowly, right? So one generation, you'll say everybody from America is now a slave. And we'll prove it by shooting you and locking you up in prisons that we'll call plantations. And we'll bring some Africans over to increase the myth. But listen, you can go to Mystic Seaport in Mystic, Connecticut, and you can look at the old ships because Europeans love keeping everything about their history. Just go to Paris and you'll see a ruin from the 1100s underneath plaster for a newer building, underneath a facade for a newer building, right? Because they just paste over old stuff. So believe me, if Europeans had created a slave trade with all of these slave trip ships, there would be more artifacts from that, a lot more artifacts. But instead, we see one or two, right? Everybody's seen the picture of the black man with huge welts on his back, right? And the Europeans show us that again and again to show there's no limit to the brutality that they're willing to inflict on the landowners to get their land. So we get the myth of slavery wrapped around the people living here and enforced by the Europeans. And then we get Jim Crow and the big Revolutionary War. And the Revolutionary War ended up displacing the entire generation of Black American landowners more than anything else. It wasn't really about the North and the South. It wasn't really about one group of Europeans saying, we're moral and we don't believe in slavery. It wasn't about that at all. It was about taking over the land, right? I mean, look right now. Right now, we're supposed to believe that Russia is at war with NATO when they're all kin. All of them is kin. They're all kin. So who's the war with? Nobody. They're fighting amongst themselves. They're positioning. They're trying to get us to take sides, like they did in World War II. Do you know how many Africans were recruited to fight in World War II? And when those Africans tried to become a part of society in Europe and take advantage of all the spoils of war, they learned racism. But by then, they'd already created a relationship, and Europeans had established military installations in the African countries. But things have changed there now quite a bit, right? I mean, the Black South Africans actually demanded that the Afrikaners leave, didn't they? And Julius Malema is very aggressive. I heard that the ruler of Guinea is also very aggressive. And I met Africans at a JT Fox convention where a woman from Germany physically assaulted me because she didn't want me sitting in the front section. And she was like, "How dare you sit in this section?" It was Europeans only in her mind. And she actually hit me. And I had it on video. And I called the police. And when the police came in, they said that Marriott asked me to leave and trespassed me because JT Fox had all the Europeans. They're at the convention. He's bringing a lot of money in, and my human rights didn't matter. A German European could hit me and push me and insult me. And the Europeans in America would say, "Oh, that's all right. That's all, that's all right. Don't offend my cousins." Right? So now you got Jim Crow. And Jim Crow takes all the free blacks, everybody that was free, because it takes a while to get this myth credible, right? You don't have any material culture. You don't have a bunch of old slave ships at the Mystic Seaport. And if you go to Mystic Seaport, you know Europeans were little compared to Americans. They were little child-sized men, especially back then. And with their nutrition in Europe, the competition for food, they were not big men. So their ships at the Mystic Seaport are tiny. They're little ships. They're little sleeping cots, child-sized beds. So you tell me, how could those Europeans go to Africa where there are bigger men with more bone density and then put them in these little ships? So then we see that the Smithsonian has this picture of a slave ship where people are chained to the bottom of the hull of the ship, head to toe, head to toe, head to toe, every single inch of it. Well, just think about the waste problem, okay? If you've got people chained head to toe, head to toe, head to toe, and they have no access to a bathroom, there's going to be waste slushing on the bottom of the ship, and they're going to die before they get very far from dysentery and E. coli, right? And the stench for the slave catchers is going to be lethal. So we know just from looking at that picture that that's completely impractical. That's somebody's dream, but that's not real. That's not a real event. That's not a real ship. And where is that ship? And we see a shackle here or there. But if you brought every single black person in America here, if you brought the heirs of every black person in America here, you'd have a lot more material culture to show for it, right? And I just don't believe that their supply chain was that technologically advanced. Okay. But one thing that they learned from blood libel, a practice to hide uh, child killing, pedophile, uh, blood sacrificing Satanists in the 1100s in Europe. After the first pogrom, the Europeans created blood libel. And The public discourse is confusing what blood libel is, but blood libel was just a system of propaganda and mass control that include rumors, influencers, and once the Gutenberg press was created, newspapers, pretty much the foregoing system of the CBS News, of all of the news channels, of the fake media news, of the European news. Okay, so blood libel was where that began in 1100. So from that science, the Europeans learned you don't really have to deal with the truth as long as you perpetuate a lie and keep it going. So slavery, no. But if you have a group of people and you keep telling them they were slaves, like Henry Louis Gates does on his Finding Your Roots PBS publication, Henry Louis Gates, the plagiarist, the architect of my current downfall. If you have a man like Henry Louis Gates, a respected Harvard scholar, telling people, "Oh, look, Dionne Warwick, your family descended from slaves," then you are perpetuating this idea that we came from slavery when we did not. Okay? We did not. Look at us. Just look at us. We are a beautiful, strong, vibrant people. We've had the abundance of America behind us for thousands of years. Good nutrition, beautiful skies, plenty of places to walk, lots of fresh fish, places to swim. We've had this for millions of years. We were not trapped in London in the fog. We were not a part of Marie Antoinette's reality where only the rich could afford to eat until the people got so upset that they decided it was time to slaughter the eaters. America, so big, so grand that Europeans wrote songs about us and understood the concept of freedom in a way they had never understood before from looking at our lifestyles and our assets. But they didn't want to share because in Europe there was no sharing. There wasn't enough to share. So while Americans had generations of abundance and prosperity, Europeans had generations of lack and want and resentment and hostility. And they brought that here. They brought that here. And you add to that a penchant for worshiping the devil, and you've really got something, haven't you? I mean, you've really got something there. I want to know how come I was disfigured? And that's okay. How come my back was broken? And that's okay. How come the Moore Law Group was behind an illegal eviction and now they have taken the records of the Visa card in my name with a 111 Broadway, New York address on it that was opened in 2006 and used until 2017 that ended with a $3,600 balance on it? Now, how did the bank keep that from me until I finally find out? How did Bank of America keep that account from me? How did they keep it going? And when my bank account was being extorted, did they use my own money to pay that bill? Well, these are things I'll never know because the Moore Law Group, as of last week, now owns those papers. And when I call the Bank of America to say, give me those papers, they say, we can't. There's nothing we can do. The Moore Law Group owns that now. Well, that means that the Moore Law Group has stolen evidence of a crime against me. But hey, guess what? Crimes against me are A-OK, all right. Crimes against me are actually encouraged because crimes against me get rid of the competition for my land. In Oklahoma, a European named Joanne Deck wrote her into my family oral history from Nichols Oil. Nichols Oil gathered an oral history of my family for the Oklahoma Department of Transportation that was planning to seize yet another chunk of my acres of land for public highways. Another chunk. And they did interviews with everybody in my family to create a genealogy as if they didn't already know. The real reason they did it was to write Joanne Deck of New York into the record. And when I went to examine the books, Joanne Deck has a title or a deed to my land. And my heirs have been written out of the book. They have forged the pages in a handwritten title book in Wewoka County to erase my ownership of the land. But even if I try to go to Oklahoma to claim it or develop it, Judge Butner and a probate attorney made it very clear that they'll do to me what the Arizona State Troopers did to me. They will kidnap me on phony charges and lock me up or kill me. You know, the Arizona State Troopers were trying to kill me. He had passed the jail. He was on his way to the African safari, which is not a safari at all. It's just an abandoned piece of desert where they kill Black people and dump them. I bet if you go to the African safari, you'll find the bodies of people like me, unless they kill us there and then sell our bodies, because that's a possibility too, especially in Arizona, where there were so many ETs that would be in the human meat industry intergalactically. But Officer Crawford was going to shoot me in the head. I saw the premonition of it as clearly as you see me right now, if you're looking. And he got a call on his little computer, and he couldn't believe it. So he stepped outside the vehicle, parked on the side of the road right near the African safari sign. That's how I knew we were there, because he was getting to the place where he was going to shoot me in the head. And they told him, call it off, because my social media had recorded them kidnapping me live. It was recorded live. Now that should have gone viral, shouldn't it? But it didn't. It didn't go viral. And I think that was for my own protection. I think that the reason my stories don't go viral is for my own protection, because it would just hasten the Europeans killing me. It would just hasten them finding a way to put me in jail. But when I found out that the Moral Law Group bought those papers from Bank of America, the papers that prove I was a victim of identity theft, along with the history of where the payments came from, who signed the documents, what bills were charged, every bit of evidence is in the bank. And the bank got rid of it like a hot potato. The Bank of America got rid of the evidence. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? What do you think of the fact that the police kidnapped me and tortured me, and that I have proof published all over the place that they had no right to detain me? No right at all. What about a FEMA camp where the soldiers burn my face with chemicals, where they shoot me with bioweapons? And I'm supposed to think all of this is imaginary? Well, slavery is imaginary for the most part. But the ways that the enemy is trying to make sure that my line never gets to possess my property, it's astounding. It's astounding. You know, with my inheritance, I could have heirs because people would be able to afford more children. Are you keeping track of the ways Americans are trying to survive? Living in vehicles like Minivan Lady? Like the people that are spending their lives on campers? People living in their cars? What Moore Law Group did to me, along with the real estate associations globally, nationally, isn't something just for me. They're doing it to all the Americans. All of us are suffering. All of us are finding ourselves having to come with creative ways to live. Hotels? How long can I sustain living in hotels? The stress of moving every month alone is devastating psychologically. It's devastating. But this is what my enemies want for me. And I'm supposed to believe that the enemies of America are in Ukraine or Russia or China? No, unbelievable. Okay? My hope is on India and China because when I look at the governments of India and China, I see Indians and Chinese. Okay? When I look at the government of Russia, I see blonde haired Europeans, German stock, British stock. And if you know the history of the government of Russia, you'll know that they were all cousins. All these monarchs were cousins, and they just divided everything up, much like they did here in America, right? Just divided everything up amongst themselves and used the military that we pay for and everything we pay for, use that to persecute and rob us. You know, we are in so much trouble. And so few people are holding the guns to our heads. But as long as Europeans refuse to acknowledge the truth of racism, as long as they feel that they know that Russia is them. They know that Ukraine is them. They know that all the war is them. And they know that when the war is over, they will win because they're fighting themselves. And they know that their heirs will be rewarded. So to me, in their minds, they're always fighting us, the indigenous owners of the land. I don't even know what's happened to the real Australians. I remember them from National Geographic magazine, but I look at what they call Australians now, and all I see are Europeans. I look at Hawaiians now, and I don't see the people that I saw when I went to Hawaii in 1980. I see Europeans now. Every beach, I don't see any Maori in New Zealand anymore. I see Babe the pig farmers, Europeans. Obviously, Europeans had a goal to take over every coastline on the planet because that's what they've done. So when I think about extraterrestrials coming to this planet, and I know that they're coming to stop nuclear war, then I know they're coming for the Europeans. Now, I was listening to Fleur Brun yesterday, and she mentioned Cliff High. So I checked out Cliff High today. I check him out on the regular. And Cliff High was talking about what happens when a superior culture meets an inferior culture. And nowhere did he mention agency. Nowhere in his conversation with a European artificial intelligence bot dialogue. Nowhere in it did he mention that the way the Europeans are superior is because they murder and rob everyone. That's what makes them superior. Now, we've heard from Courtney Brown in the Farsight Institute that the good ETs are here and they look Caucasian, he said, which means they come from the Caucasus Mountains. Because a lot of people like to say Caucasian to make Europeans sound more fancy. But Caucasians are from the Caucasus Mountains near Russia, and that's where they're from. And he says that his contactees look European. So that makes me feel a little concerned because if European culture is a part of European appearances, then the good ETs won't be good to me. They won't make sure that my heirs get my inheritance passed on. They won't make sure that the police that tortured me and crippled me, the military that disfigured my face and my body, the way that bioweapons were deployed on me that I have to live with every day. I know there won't be any cures for this and there won't be any remedy for this. But I can't believe that European culture gets further than the earth, you know? Then I listen to what David Icke says and Alex Jones before he was bought by Elon about this being a prison planet and all of us being trapped here by a vicious, ruthless enemy, and that the good ETs are here to liberate us because this enemy is controlled by an extragalactic extragalactic entity, right? Just like when the Europeans come to America, they deploy different troops and different strategies to take over each of our tribes and control our lands and our assets. So would an extraterrestrial invader. They would co opt our men, get our Earth men to work with them to go places they can't go, infil- infiltrate us, so to speak, and then just slowly consume us. And if we are to believe that the intergalactic war is between people with a morality that respects liberty and difference, an intergalactic force that has a wholesome sense of integrity, and dare I say, godliness, a love of God, the good of God, the God that wants the best for us. If those people are fighting people that act like the Europeans, then I can feel comforted no matter what they look like. No matter what they look like, I know that they will have the morality that is required behind a liberating army that's going to help me and my progeny, that's going to restore the story of my ancestors. My ancestors were not slaves, my ancestors were landowners. And the Europeans of today are doing everything in their power to make sure that I never see my inheritances and that I die in pain and misery and poverty. And can't you say that for every Black American? I mean, every Black American that's been here for hundreds of years is a landowner. It's not about a piece of paper or a corrupt European court. It's not about a military. It's about being here. It's about being a part of the land. It's about your ancestors' bones making the dust that everybody's breathing. So I want to know why the Moore Law Group is everywhere I go, robbing me of my property and my financial security. Who is the Moore Law Group? And how come they own the paper from the bank that proves a crime against me? And how come they committed a crime against me in evicting me from my home in Arizona? Who is the Moore Law Group? And why are they after me?